Hey everybody, this is Brett from foodtruckempire.com. Welcome to Food Truck Academy Week 1. We'll just about to get started here. Sometimes the video delays just a little bit, so I'm just gonna kind of talk blindly, but thank you so much for being here. We are, this is week 1. We are here. We are going to be together for basically the next 2 months together, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I see there's a lot of folks already inside the chat area, which I've got up, so that's awesome. If you happen to be there in the chat, just let me know where you're from, first of all. It's just kind of cool to get an idea of where everybody's located, just to find out where we are geographically. I see Corinne is from Rochester. That's awesome. Rochester, New York. Hey everybody. Doug, how's it going? Long time no see. We got El Reno, Oklahoma. Thomas, hey, how's it going? Angela from Springfield. We got Staunton, Virginia. Oh, Gonzalo's moving there. Awesome, awesome. Boise, Idaho from Devin. White Plains, New York. Doug, Dan, Boston. Oh, Rapid City. Yes, I love Rapid City. My parents were just there last weekend, actually, and I'm not even joking about that. They went on vacation there. Hillside, New Jersey. Ware, Massachusetts. Amy. Ninja Pig, Austin. Miami, Tatiana. Ryan, Las Vegas. Awesome. Melanie, Sacramento. Thanks, everybody, for being here and mentioning where you're from. This is really, really awesome. So on the line with me today too, I've got Anthony, who is going to be basically your class instructor here for the next 8 weeks from Switch It Up Food Truck. Anthony, how's it going?
It's going great. I love doing this class. It's so fun meeting all of you and learning about your backgrounds and seeing all of your awesome food concepts. I can't wait to get to know all of you better and to just answer all your questions. Every single question.
Awesome. So yeah, I guess before we kind of dive into everything, obviously we're going to be meeting up for the next 8 weeks. This is the first class. So just kind of want to set your expectations up for what's going to happen over this time period. Basically each week there's a different topic covered. So it could be figuring out the laws and the rules and regulations where you live, what your food truck build is going to look like. We, of course, cover like how you're going to actually make money on your truck, how to generate revenue, how to operate your truck. Each week is kind of broken out into a different topic that we cover. And then also some of the weeks too, we're going to be bringing in some of the past successful students that we've had just to share their perspective on what it's like to operate a food truck. Because I think it's good to get Anthony's experience because he's a lot of years running his food truck, but it's just good to get some different perspectives on, what's worked for different people. Different things work for different people in different areas. So just want to expose you to as much as possible and as much information as possible. That way you have, the best chance of success getting started. But ultimately, the end goal of this class is for you to have a completed business plan at the end of it that you can take and you'll know exactly where to go to vend, exactly what you're going to be selling on your menu, what your profit's going to be from each of those two. And I mean, a business plan is really helpful too from the standpoint if you want to get investors or if you want to get a loan from a bank. Really, really critical that you have those. Just a few housekeeping things, and I should have asked this right away. I'm assuming I'm coming through okay from everybody. If everything sounds okay on your end, hopefully it does. But just a couple of housekeeping things. I know most folks have already found out that there's a live chat part depending on your browser that you can ask questions on, or just say hi, talk to each other, get to know each other a little bit. It'll be either on the right side of this video or directly below this video. If you're not able to type in anything into there, it probably means that you're not logged into Google. So just make sure that you log in there, and then you should be able to ask any questions that you want to ask. And anytime, and this goes for today and future classes too, if you have any questions, and even when information is being presented, just feel free to type it into the chat box, and then we'll get to it at some point during the class. Like Anthony already said, anything that you ask, feel free to ask anything, revenue numbers, whatever you want. Anthony is really, really transparent and happy to share any information with you. It just might take, a little bit to get to it, but definitely add it in there. Let's see, just a couple other housekeeping things before I turn it over to Anthony here. Obviously, everybody got an email from me before the class with a link to this YouTube live video that we're on right now. And then also you got a link to the Food Truck Academy private members area. I think the URL is like foodtruckempire.mykajabi.com. Anyways, how I want you to kind of think about these is back when you were in college, right? You had the classes that you attended and that you went to, and that's kind of this part, right? The YouTube live section. And then you've also got your textbook that you can kind of go through on your own time. The My Kajabi private members area, that's sort of like the textbook, except hopefully a little bit more entertaining on your end. It's got videos in it, but it's got a lot of the course material. So I'll be sending out, especially before our next classes, information and links from My Kajabi that you can just log into with your username and password, access the different videos and the text information in there, and that's kind of like your textbook, if you will, that you can use to access anytime. So, but no, Tyler, punctuality is extremely important. Okay, so with all that being said, now that we got the housekeeping stuff out of the way, we've kind of said hi, I thought, why don't we introduce Anthony Salvania, owner of Switch It Up Food Truck. How's it going? Why don't you share a little bit about yourself, just kind of share your experience and your background with everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Brett, and thank you all for being here. So as Brett said, I'm Anthony, owner of Switch It Up Food Truck in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm very excited to see so many New Yorkers in this class. I'm a former New Yorker, I guess, born and raised there. Grew up in a town called Beacon, just south of Poughkeepsie, New York. Moved out to Albuquerque to get my PhD in physics. And then as soon as I got that, I was kind of fed up with science. And so I was talking to my brother, who got a culinary degree from the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York. And we just had this weird idea to do a food truck centered around the idea of peanut butter and jelly and nut butters and spread sandwiches. So from there, we just put this concept together and wrote a business plan, entered the business plan in a competition that the school that I was at here in Albuquerque, University of New Mexico. There it was a business competition through the business school at UNM, and we won second place. And I actually used that competition as kind of like a way to judge whether this concept was valuable or not. And we got second place, so I was like, well, there's more than one person out there who likes our idea, and businesses that had kind of fundraised to put some money together gave us $5,000 to kind of run with this concept. So the fact that they were contributing money made it feel like there was more than just somebody saying, hey, that's a great idea, you should try it. So it was kind of a way for us to kind of launch our platform. We spent a year from that point. It was, I think this was 2012. We spent a year from that point kind of revitalizing our business plan, finding places to get money from. And we'll talk about this in a few weeks. I think in week 3 we talk about it. all the different ways that you can get money for your food truck, because I've gone through them all. So found places to get money, got a loan, got some seed money from friends, family, the business competition, self-funded, crowd-funded, and launched our food truck about 6 months after that 1 year mark, after we got the loan acquired. Had a food truck custom built for us, and we've just been having a great time. One thing I will say, just as a preface, and I'm sure I'll rehash this a lot, is that Brett, the Yankees always beat the Twins in the playoffs. The one thing I will say is that even though it's a lot of fun running a food truck, you'll have a lot of great memories, a lot of awesome stories as well. It's a lot of work, and there's no amount of things that I can say, Brett can say, the guests that we have on here can say, that prepares you for how much work running a food truck is. You're only really into this for making a boatload of cash. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you should go open up a gas station instead, because there's a lot of work and it doesn't feel like you make a lot of money. We have a good time. We have the freedom to do what we want, freedom to design our menu and make our food the way we want. And we actually have a lot of great customers who support us because of our own personal food philosophy. So as we go through this course, there's a few things that we'll talk about. One is the big thing that this whole course is kind of built around, is like, how do you compose a business plan? Why would you even want to write a business plan? And the short answer is you don't want to write a business plan. It's the worst thing in the world. It takes a lot of time. But the reason is it's necessary. Almost everything that you could need in accomplishing getting a food truck, actual food truck that you have the ability to cook out of and serve people out of, requires a business plan. You need to know where to get your business permits from. So you got to do some kind of research. You need to know where your customers are going to be. You need to do some research, and you can't just simply memorize all of this information. So it's a pretty good idea to write these ideas down. Not only that, but it's incredibly important for banks and funding agencies and loan officers that you have some idea of what you want your business to be. And it doesn't have to be the exact version of what the food truck becomes, but it should be something pretty tangible that you can say, here's proof that I've done some research, I've read some things, I've been out and talked in the community, and there's a real need for this whole thing here. So check this out, because this isn't just something that I've thrown together last night. This is something that I've been thinking about for months, years. So that is probably the number one reason why you definitely want to have a business plan, is to get the money. But there's a whole other bunch of reasons that I can't even think of that you would need a business plan for. And just having it and having done the work makes you much better prepared for the actual food truck grind than if you hadn't done any of that in the first place. So this week, I invite you to ask questions about the business plan, about running a food truck, all these sorts of things. And as we go through the course, we'll have, like Brett said, we'll have themes for each day where you can ask much more specific questions as we start to formulate our ideas and hopefully get a clearer picture of what each of your food trucks is going to look like. So the business plan you can kind of think of as broken down into, I think, like 3 or 4 main sections. Four. The fourth one is probably the big one that the banks are going to care about, and that's your financial statement. There is, in the week 1 materials that Brett will remind us of, a bunch of documents that you can download this week. There is the Switch It Up business plan, the original one that we wrote that we submitted for the food truck competition, and also, the business plan competition, and also the document that I sent to our loan officer. That got approved and got us the loan. So you can see all the work that I put into getting our business up and running. There's also a business plan template that I kind of just took out all of the information that I wrote and kind of structured it in a way that might make some sense. So you can kind of just go from there, use that template, as a way to get started and at least know like what belongs where. This order is not too important, but hopefully you don't get bogged down with the details of like what belongs where, and hopefully you can just kind of start putting your ideas onto paper. There's also a financial template, which is just a stripped out version of the Switch It Up business plan template, and has kind of like just some rough numbers in it that you can use to get started. We'll talk all about that in horrible, super gory detail, I think around week 4. And so I hope you'll have lots of questions for that, and I'm sure you'll have some questions today. But it breaks down, you know, what your possible monthly sales and income will be, minus bills and that sort of expenses, and hopefully will allow you to put together a rough estimate of what 1 year of operating a food truck will look like. So that'll be a major part of the business plan, is just understanding what's going in and what's going out in terms of money. There's also the operations plan, which is a way for you to kind of look at the food truck from your ownership perspective. You know, where are you going to vend? How are you going to do your day-to-day business? What is your menu going to look like? How are you going to get your ingredients? All of these kinds of like nuts and bolts operation type things. I like to look at operating a food truck from 2 perspectives. There's one is like my perspective as the owner, and the second is the customer perspective. Plan is like the owner / perspective. There's also the marketing plan, which is the customer perspective of operating a food truck. So, you know, they don't really care where you can get your ingredients from or how much it costs you, but they do care about, you know, is it locally sourced, or is it, you know, gluten-free maybe in some cases? Does it fit their diet? Is the cost right for them? Am I getting it in a reasonable location, or do I have to, you know, drive across town? Can I only find them at certain venues, maybe only at events, that sort of thing. So you want to think about the food truck from both the owner operator perspective and also from the customer perspective. And like I said, the marketing portion of the business plan is where you think about the customer's perspective. And when we get to that, I think in week 3, we will go over all of the different things that you would want to think about when putting this customer perspective onto your food truck. And then, you know, there's a whole lot of bonus material too that we provided. So definitely check out the bonus material. There's stuff on social media marketing. I think we talk a little bit about crowdfunding too, and we'll go through that when we talk about funding sources as well. And I think there's at least one document where I really go into the nuts and bolts of like providing different types of electricity to your truck, because powering your truck is extremely important. And I definitely know that there's some information in there about food truck insurance, which is way more nuanced than anybody cares for, but also helps you avoid some potential pitfalls when looking for insurance for a food truck. But not to freak you out about it, because food truck insurance is, from at least like our owner perspective, pretty easy. Most of the time you'll probably have just like one choice, and this is just how the plan is. So you just have to know what's it cost me and what do I get out of it. But those resources are there for you. One other last thing to add about all of the documentation that we have is that feel free to download and save all of that information. It's yours forever. The videos you can download, I think, and these YouTube video links are yours to keep and go back to whenever you want. Brett, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's perfect. I was going to say too, and I just asked while you were chatting in there, because Lauren brought it up, which I thought was a really good question. Like, if you know what type of food truck that your concept that you're thinking about starting, definitely share it within the notes or the comments here. Just nice to hear those. Definitely, if you don't mind sharing, obviously you don't have to, but a lot of really good ideas here too. And I think one thing too that's Anthony will agree with is that a lot of these, it's not like you have to reinvent the wheel. Like Lauren, grilled cheese, awesome. I mean, it's just about anywhere in the United States, people want to eat that. Especially amped up like grilled cheese sandwiches, like unique grilled cheese sandwiches, which I'm sure is exactly what you're planning to do with that. I mean, the costs are low with that, so you kind of know that that is going to work. It's just a matter of like executing it. So yeah, just a lot of really good ideas here. More the thing that we get worried about is when it's like a really, really weird idea, or like a really tough to execute idea, or a really expensive food. That's kind of when it gets hard a lot of times to make it work. And like cold brew coffee, yeah, that's awesome. You can do really well in that too. So yeah, definitely add your ideas down there. That's awesome to see all of these. Wood-fired pizza, awesome. Italian food, obviously. Yeah, and definitely, I was going to mention too, French cut fries. Doug, who I know just got his trailer, congratulations
Yeah,
on that one. But I was going to say too, definitely make sure to ask any questions that you have to over the course of this class, because you never know like what questions are going to like spur Anthony to kind of like think of something that he would have otherwise not mentioned. One thing that I just wanted to bring up specifically was, and I think you'll probably meet him later on in this class, is from our last course that we did. We had a member called his name is Dave Kralik, and he'll be on here later. But he started a Polish food truck, and Anthony he asked some sort of question about like what sides he wanted. Anthony just kind of mentioned, well, you know, when I had like these apples, like here's what I did with them. And Dave has actually started serving these like apple fries on his food truck now as like a regular side menu item. And I guess it's done really, really well. And it's a product that's really affordable to make too, and just easy to make, which is a good one. So I guess, Anthony, since this was such a good tip last time, would you mind just like sharing the recipe that you had and just kind of like your thoughts around it?
Yeah. So what Brett's referring to is our signature side on the truck, at least when the right apples are in season, are apple fries. And kind of the history of it was that my brother and we had decided we wanted to do something like this. And we spent like a week taste testing every breed of apple like we could get our hands on. I think at the time it was like 15 different varieties of apple. We just like sliced and rated and tested every single one of them. So anyways, we established that Honeycrisp is the best, but also probably the most expensive. I think most of the time it's like $3.50 a pound. Sometimes you can find it for like $2.50. And I think right now, actually, it's around $2 a pound, depending on where you are. And obviously, this isn't organic prices. Number 2 was Cameo, because they had a flavor that was very much like Honeycrisp. And they were flavor and texture that were like Honeycrisp, but they were literally half the price. And depending on what time of the year, you can kind of find replacements. Large Fuji apples are usually okay. Also, my personal favorite is Macintosh, but that's hardly in season. It's only in season in the fall. So the recipe was that we would cut these apples up into the shape of French fries, and we bought this like French fry maker. You're supposed to use it with potatoes, but we use it with apples to suck it right through, give you perfect slices every time. And we'd use equal parts sugar, brown sugar, and then about 1/3 of a part of cinnamon. And we just mix it all together. So these are uncooked, they're raw, but sweetened apples. And originally we were selling them a la carte, which is just like as the side. We were selling them for like $3, and we had pretty decent sales. But we realized that people were willing to pay more for the entrees if we paired the apple fries as a side. And they actually really enjoyed that they had like a kind of like a dessert slash side to go with the apple fries. I mean, to go with the entree. And they didn't care that now their entree was like $3 or $4 more expensive. So that's 2 tricks actually right there for you. Remember, that's sliced apples, equal parts sugar, white sugar, brown sugar, and then a little less in cinnamon, about a third of a part in cinnamon. You just mix it all together. You can stick them in the fridge. They last for a while. You can also add a little bit of lemon juice zest, and also to keep the apples a little bit fresher. Well, not really fresher, but mostly just from turning brown. And Melanie, I just saw your question. What was the portion size for $3? So for that, we would do, it's hard to measure, but we would do like a handful was a $3 portion. And we basically found that our handful was pretty consistent no matter what it was. And you would think that it's not a lot, but when you drop it on a plate, it comes out to a pretty sizable portion. And so we would put them in like little fry bags originally for $3 just so that they were manageable. But once we started realizing that people wanted them as entrees, we would stick them on the plate, right on the plate next to the entree. So it actually also gave the appearance that the entree was like now twice as big as it was before.
What do you, and I know it's early on, but like, so I guess quick question from Doug, did you make it to order?
The apple fries, on slower days, we make them to order because they take like literally 30 seconds to put together. Especially like, so the entrees we make to order. And if we have the time, we can just make that to order right simultaneously. But, you know, on really busy days, our menu shifts to more of like how can we produce this stuff much faster. And so we'll make a big batch of the sides. And when apples are out of season, another tip is popcorn is a really good side because it's dirt cheap and you can do a lot of really creative things with popcorn. So anyway, so we'd make like a big batch of either the popcorn or the apple fries. And if they were the apple fries, that's where you add the lemon juice to keep them from turning brown. But you'd make it like maybe like a gallon portion of the apple fries. And that would last you for like, depending on how busy it is, maybe like 20, 30 minutes before you have to make them all. But the time it takes to make like one portion of apple fries versus, 20 portions of apple fries is maybe like 3 minutes instead of like, 30 seconds to 3 minutes is not a huge adjustment. So it's much better to just do a whole bunch at one time and just be able to pump them out the window as people are ordering them.
Perfect. It looks like Amy's going to the hard side of it, which I can definitely see working well at. Anthony, too, I was going to make sure to ask you that at this point, too, like, I guess we're all kind of getting started, most of the folks in this class are kind of at the beginning stages, or some actually already have their trucks. I guess what part, like right before you're going to get started, where would you recommend focusing like your efforts or your research at this time? Would it be like on the menu, on the truck? What do you think?
For the early time, I think the best thing to do is to focus on your menu, because you can't really tell what you're going to need in a truck if you don't know what you're going to cook. And so, like some trucks, if you're looking, that was one of the big things when we were looking for a truck, and we ended up just going with like a custom builder. A lot of the trucks were very specifically built for whatever the owner of that truck was cooking. So like some trucks only had ovens, or some trucks only had like a flat top grill, or some only had like a stovetop or they may have like some combination of the two, but they didn't have like adequate refrigeration, or maybe they were only a coffee truck, so they didn't have any cooking equipment. So I'd have to install all of that stuff. So, you know, it's definitely a good idea to know exactly what you're going to make. And you don't have to know like the specific menu items, but if you know you're going to be using a stove a lot, then you can plan your menu kind of around that, be able to be flexible with some things, and then kind of build from there. And then that kind of helps you make the decisions later when, okay, I need to get a truck. So I definitely am going to be cooking on the stovetop, and I'm probably going to use this flat top grill almost as much as the stovetop, or maybe that's the opposite. So you get those two things and you save space on like the stove, the oven, so you don't need ovens. Or, you know, warming pans if you're doing baking. Maybe you need like a sandwich prep table. If you're doing some kind of like scoop and go style thing, you can get the hot and the cold side. And so it really depends on what you're making. So you really want to plan that out now, for sure.
Cool. And Vanzella is asking, could we talk a little bit more about target price points? Example, like what's considered to be a low, medium, or high price point on a food truck, and then any points on how to gauge our target population price point acceptance. Good question.
So I'm assuming you're talking about price points from the customer's perspective. So like high, it really depends on where you're at. Like LA, New York City, a high price point would probably be something like over $15 per, you know, plate. If you're doing hot dogs, obviously, like a high thing would be like $7 or $8. And it also, again, depends on the style of food. So if you're doing tacos, like if you're doing a basic taco, you'd probably do something like $2 per taco. If you're doing gourmet tacos, it would be somewhere in the realm of like $3 to $4 per taco. But actually, more importantly, it's better to think about this stuff from yourself. So, you know, one of the reasons why I also mentioned that you should plan your menu out now is so that you can figure out, okay, I'm going to be making this killer sandwich. I need these 5 ingredients. It's going to cost me this much money for these 5 ingredients per sandwich. So I'll just throw something out there. Maybe it costs me $2.50 for the ingredients to make each sandwich. That's the average cost per sandwich. You know, a low price point for that food item would probably be like $6 or $7. A high price point for that would be like $11, $12 if that's what your cost is. So the sweet spot actually is like $9, $10 right in there. And in some cities, that's like actually kind of cheap. So it really depends on where you're going. It depends on where you're serving. And that it's, I honestly, I hate that answer all the time, but a lot of the things that we talk about in this class really depends on where you're located, you know, how much it costs for you to vend, how much it costs for you to, you know, sell this stuff, how much people are paying for it, you know, what the food truck laws are, for instance, which we get into later. These are all dependent on where you are specifically. So, you know, it really depends on what you're serving in this case. If you're doing like, you know, scoop and go type stuff, or pizza's really cheap, tacos are really cheap, that sort of thing, then maybe you're thinking of it like a la carte, and so it'd be like $2, $3. And the sweet spot, honestly, is like much easier to find than you think. So I would, like, as you're planning this stuff out, as you're thinking about it, just think about the costs, and then you can kind of start extrapolating what it's going to cost to the customers. And we actually kind of like had a formula. A lot of restaurants will do, they'll multiply the food cost by 3. And that actually didn't work so well for us. There was too much, it was too much play. And we actually found the sweet spot, like right where people bought the most of items was when we actually multiplied the food cost by 4. So like I was talking about the apple fries before, it cost us like 50 to 75 cents per portion for apple fries, and that's why we were charging like $3 for it. When we paired it in the meal, the apple fries cost, food costing wise, was like 25 to 50 cents for us. That was our food cost. And then our sandwiches were like roughly in the $1.50 range. So when you combine it, that's like $2. So our menu prices were either $8 to $10 depending on what the food cost was, and usually it ranged from like $2 to $2.50. And we found that that was like the perfect number that people were willing to pay for, had high customer satisfaction, and they felt like they were getting a good return on investment. But again, we'll talk a lot more about this as we go through this course. So definitely think about that as you're writing your menu, and come back and ask that question again. I don't think I can hear Brett anymore.
Oh, sorry about that. Thanks for letting me know. My my daughter is 10 months old, and she was just crying in the background, so I was trying to avoid everybody from hearing that. Anyways, I was just going to say, Dan mentioned that usually the cost is based on 3 to 4 times your food cost. I imagine Dave's probably in the restaurant industry or something related, but yeah, definitely sounds like that's in line with what you're saying here too. This is a good one from Lauren, just on the topic of customizing a food truck after purchase. So Lauren asks if it's easy to customize a truck after purchasing, like you buy one and you're almost there, but you might need to switch some of the equipment around. I'm assuming is what you mean. One thing that I would just say from, I don't know if it was the first or second Food Truck Academy class that we did, but definitely before you purchase any food truck, like get to know what the laws and the regulations are in your area before you invest any money just at all into a truck that maybe seems cheap, because it could definitely end up costing you a lot more. I know the first or second Food Truck Academy, we had someone that joined that had purchased a food truck with the intent of using it. Basically found out that the way that it was set up, there is no possible way that it could end up working in the area and in the city that they planned to vend in. So they actually had to go and buy a second food truck that was up to the specifications of the area that they plan to serve. So first big tip, definitely before you invest in anything, even if it seems like a good deal or it seems cheap, figure out the location or the rules of the location that you're going to be in, because it can end up saving you a lot of money. And obviously, generally speaking, Middle America is going to generally be a little bit easier than the coasts from a regulation perspective. So you can kind of use that as a little barometer. Not always the case, though. It's just so dependent city to city.
Yeah, bigger cities typically have more strict rules about food truck operations. And that was actually one of the key functions of like our business plan, was to help you figure out exactly what I needed to ask a builder. And without having done all that research, I totally would have been effed.
Let's see.
Somebody asked about where to find the rules for our area. Sorry, Corinne. Where do we find the rules for our area? Health department, county offices. If you're in like a more rural area, then yeah, your county government would be it. City government for sure. Health department, one for health codes. You usually want to talk to your fire marshal as well, because they'll have like all the fire safety regulations that are required for the kitchen. And believe it or not, your local business, like small business organization, will know also like the more specific places to go and get the more nitty gritty stuff that's not covered by health or fire marshal. And also There was one other source. Oh, if you have like local food truck builders, they probably build a lot in your specific area. So they also, if they don't know all of the laws, they'll know the people that they most frequently work with. So they can at least point you in the right direction. So they're also a good source.
And some cities do publish all the information online. So, I mean, you can, like Boston, for example, if you were going to start it in Boston, the city website publishes all the information. I know Madison, Wisconsin does too. Madison, Wisconsin's like a weird one where they have really, really, this goes back to kind of like some areas just have really weird restrictions. And Madison, Wisconsin, I think that like the largest trailer that you can't actually have a food truck. You can only have a trailer, I believe it is, and the largest it can be is like 8 feet. So you got these little kind of tiny boxes that are able to serve there within that area. So yeah, definitely, I guess bottom line is like do your research before making that purchase. Similar to that question is Jared asked about a truck. I have one available to me too, and I have a fabrication guy. Is it difficult to retrofit an older truck?
That is definitely a question for the fabrication guy. Usually it's like for them, they just look at it as like a box. Like I have this much space. It's like a 10 by 15 foot or 20 foot space. What can I fit in here and how can I arrange it in what way? The things you have to consider that they're going to put in there is plumbing for your propane, electrical lines for, heating, air conditioning, water pump, that sort of thing. And then, they might put up walls to kind of hide the piping and plumbing and all that stuff. And then obviously like water pump, sink, and plumbing for the wastewater and all that stuff. So they have to think about where they're going to put all of this stuff. So if you like look at the food truck, they're actually like kind of pretty basic for fab guys. They're just like squares with, they just have to arrange stuff in a certain way. Like a competent plumber will be able to like whip it up pretty quickly. A competent electrician will be able to wire it up pretty quickly. It's not too complicated. And I learned that the hard way because I ended up having to take like my entire truck apart after having bought it. That's probably a much longer story for another day. But the fab guys will know pretty much how quickly it can come together, and it shouldn't be too hard to retrofit an older vehicle if they're just putting the kitchen equipment in there. But if they need to like, this is probably better for like a mechanic, but if your city regulations require that there are certain codes that the vehicle itself needs to meet, then you'll have to like figure out how to deal with it from like a vehicle mechanic standpoint as well. And that was also part of the problem in the story, I think, Brett, that you were telling, was like not the vehicle itself like didn't meet the proper codes, and the food truck, the food kitchen portion of it also didn't meet codes. And that's why like no matter what he did on either end, it was never going to work in his situation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's week 4 we go through kind of more step by step into like the law part, because as you guys could probably tell, like it's so dependent on so many things. Just a few things though to like kind of get your mind going about like things that you should ask about or areas that you could ask about. I mean, most areas they're going to require like a 3-compartment sink, right? A hand washing sink. Some places too, they're going to require that you have like a water tank, like a wastewater tank that is of a certain size too. So maybe it'll be like, it needs to be 15% larger than your cold water area. Just kind of like real specific little things like that, that it's like, oh, I got this perfect 100% grade food truck made. Oh, wait, but my water, you know what I mean? My wastewater tank is not 15% bigger than, my other one. So there's just a lot of weird things that you could get into if you don't know what you need ahead of time, bottom line.
Yeah, so one of the pieces of advice I like to share is, as you're getting familiar with these things, get to know the people who are actually going to inspect your vehicles, because they'll offer you tips now that will save them time and you money in the long run. So like here in Albuquerque, we needed to, you know, obviously get our health inspection. So we talked with like the health inspectors, and they actually told us like what they look for when they're inspecting the vehicles. So we knew exactly like what to avoid. In speaking with the fire marshal, we learned that there's like another governing body in New Mexico called like the LP Gas Bureau, and we called them the propane police. And once we met those guys, we learned a whole lot of other things about like where the propane tank has to be stored on a food truck, which actually up until that point, nobody had actually mentioned before. And like at this time, this was like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, nobody in Albuquerque actually had their vehicle up to code. So they couldn't do like big events where the propane police were going to be inspecting. And so they gave us tips at that time that actually saved us a ton of money, so that we can make sure that we put our propane and we had the plumbing arranged in the proper locations. So I highly recommend, I can't even stress this enough, I highly recommend that you like get to know these guys, and you can actually form like pretty decent working / friendships, relationships with these people, because they're like offering you good advice, and they don't want to see you fail as a business. And it makes their job harder if you're like failing and causing all these like inspection issues, and they have to shut you down.
Yeah. And Laura, no, definitely not asking too many questions. Actually, like week one, we always try to leave a lot of room for just basically any type of question, because there just seems to be a lot of just random ones in week one. So we kind of have it structured to set this way. And then like week two, we kind of get more into like more structured topics, and then further along the way, it's kind of more structured too. But yeah, we kind of learned from experience from doing this a few times that you know, you just have a lot of questions like the first time that are all over the place, and we just want to take the time to answer those. Okay, let me make sure I'm getting through all these too. So Tyler asks, how much do you use social media to get the word out for your truck? Like, how important has it been for you for getting business?
In the very beginning, it was like crucial. That was like the only way that we could like build a presence and get people to learn about who we were, like right off the bat. We did like a couple of events before we even had a truck, and we basically pointed them to social media just so we can like build a conversation, build a presence, get people aware that we're like launching. About 3 years ago, basically like after our first year in operations, social media became less important, and it still has its importance. I mean, people will use that to find like where we are, but for the most part, like we have like a set rotation of places we're going to be. And so this is kind of like a two-part answer. The businesses that we partner with, we rely on their social media presence because theirs is much larger than ours can ever be. And also now, because like we partner with so many businesses, a lot of our business is actually through word of mouth. You know, like people that we have as regulars, they tell their friends, they bring their friends, and you know, then we get a lot of catering. We actually like never advertise our catering side, and we get calls like daily asking for catering events. In the very beginning, we would get like a catering gig call, like a call about a catering gig, maybe like once every other week or once a month. Like in our first month, we got like one call. And now like we're turning business away because we can't possibly, you know, cover all of these people. So, and that was like all through word of mouth building. So it you know, it depends also like where you are. Albuquerque's not a very big social media town. I know places like Denver, LA, New York, those are much more social media savvy places, and social media is much more instrumental in how they build their trucks.
Sort of a related question too from Tyler, how do you promote your truck? And I would say too, like, because I think you made a good point, there's a difference between when you first start out versus once you kind of get going and people know about you, then it's just kind of almost like you just kind of get called all the time for different things. And then it's more about like selecting the right places to be. But I guess first part, how did you, like, what were your main promotional things that like really helped you out in the beginning to get your name out there when nobody knew about you?
In the beginning, like I said, we did a lot of social media, and we actually paid for social media advertising to help build like our presence. It's actually relatively cheap. It's like, you know, Brett, you can speak much more on this, but it was roughly at this time, it was like $1 per like, essentially, is what we were paying. And that's just for like permanent engagement. Then, you know, once we started getting word of mouth, we just made sure in the very beginning that we were at like all the big events in town. And we're really competitive. So like we tried to always have like the food that left the biggest impression in people's mind. So we'd get customers that would come back at the end of the day, say like, this is the best food like here at this event, or this is the best food I've had in a while. And so we kind of built up our presence that way. Like, so a little mixture of like social media and good old fashioned guerrilla marketing. But we made sure that we were at like all the major events. Like the city of Albuquerque hosts this like huge 4th of July festival that attracts like 50,000 people. They have these summer street festivals called Summerfest, and there's 4 of them. And each one of those attracts at least 10,000 people. So we made sure that we were like at all of these events all summer long, which is, we actually launched at the beginning of the first year, which is the beginning of summer. And so being at all these big events really helped build up our presence and carried us over like through the fall and winter slowdown. But you also have to be strategic about that. And I'll save that for a whole other conversation.
I want to say too, and just because I don't want you to miss this one, I think I mentioned, I think I remember you mentioning too, I know you don't have like a formal food truck association, but there's like kind of like a food truck group that you got into like early on.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that because I like don't even pay attention to them anymore. But yeah, in the very beginning, so like Albuquerque has this food truck group. All like the food truck owners are part of this like email list. And whenever like a catering event would come in, or like an opening at a bar or an opening at like an event, all the requests would go through this food truck group, and it would just get blasted to all the owners. So it was also kind of like first come, first serve. And so I was quick on the trigger with email. So I would always like get us whatever spots we could nab, especially in the beginning, getting at breweries, getting at all these events. So that was also, thank you, Brett, for reminding me. That was also really pivotal, especially like in our first 2 months of business. Like we didn't know really where to go. It was much harder than we thought to find like steady places. So we kind of relied on like going, you know, being on this list, getting the first response, and then like building a relationship once we're at these locations with the people who were organizing it, so that we get invited back on a very repeated basis until we get to the point where we're like, we have a schedule and people are asking us to be places, and we're like, oh, we got to be here, we got to be there, whatever.
So definitely, I guess, bottom line, become friends with other food truck owners. That way you kind of get into that mix at the very least.
And they're good relationships to have anyway. Everyone always helps each other out.
Okay, going through some of these other ones. Oh, here we go. Tyler asks, do you have a commissary?
Yeah, so we don't need our commissary anymore, but when we first got started, we used it all the time for prep. Now we basically like streamlined our operation so we can do all our prep on the truck. But our commissary is actually like a surprising like location, and I'll share the secret with all of you because it's not really a secret, but try and get really creative with commissaries. You know, typical commissary is like, there's like these group kitchens. I can't remember what they're called, but you can like pay per hour or like per day or whatever to like use a community kitchen. Those are okay commissaries. Those are usually like kind of expensive. Restaurants, like if you are serving for dinner, and a good commissary might be like a breakfast place where they're not using the kitchen for like half the day. But they also, you know, they have their own costs and whatever, so they might try and charge too much. We use a local nonprofit that actually, so it was a nonprofit called, oh, now I can't remember the name, because 2 years ago they got bought by another nonprofit, and it's essentially a soup kitchen. So like they are serving only dinner for 4 days a week. And so we entered into an agreement for $250 a month to use their kitchen in the mornings and on the one day that they were not vending or not serving dinner. And so we would do all our prep on those days for $250 a month, which was like by far the cheapest commissary that we found. Once they got bought out by this other nonprofit called St. Martin's, we basically talked to them and they like waived the fee because we were never even there, but they still let us like use the commissary for inspection purposes. And so that's one of the reasons a lot of places actually require you to have a commissary, Albuquerque being one of them. And so you have to have a commissary because they require it for like food storage and also for food prep. Some cities actually don't like you doing your food prep on the truck, even if it's designed for that very thing. Turkey requires a commissary for food prep because they kind of consider most food trucks to be catering trucks. I think that idea is starting to change, so the law might change at some point, but in the meantime, we need a commissary. And so, you know, even though we're able to do our prep on the truck, it's like a better environment than being in a retail kitchen. You know, it just is what it is. So try and get creative. Some other places you guys can look are churches. A lot of churches have kitchens that they don't really use that often. Maybe they use it like twice a week or something like that. And like I said, community kitchens, and a lot of like, if you try hard enough, you'll find like kitchens run by your local government, and those ones usually have like a low cost. Maybe they're like associated with like a venue, like a park or like a hall that the city has or something like that. So some of those are like really low cost and good ways to get in there. So just kind of like look around and try and find the best bargain for yourselves.
So this one might have already gotten answered by in the comments, but Tony asked if there was examples of finding used trailers for purchase. And one of the best ones that I know of is usedvending.com. That one just has tons from like all over the place. I mean, I think some of these two were mentioned, like Craigslist. Sometimes you can get lucky, find something in your area. Anthony, do you have any other ideas? Obviously, all of that is with the disclaimer of make sure you're getting something that you can use in your area, or at least can, you know, modify without too much of an expense.
Yeah, used vending is really good. We spent a lot of time on there. eBay has okay choices. Craigslist is probably like the most local you'll see. But you know, it's hit or miss as to whether there's anything there at that time or not. And sometimes like neighboring cities that are just too far out of your way will post their information. Like we'll post a truck in your city. So if you live in Denver and you see something in Albuquerque, maybe that drive is worth it to you or not. But those are probably the big three. Used vending is probably the best just because like everybody uses it. And their model is not like that they take a huge cut of the sales from what I've heard. So to use it for that purpose.
So I don't know. I guess you'll just have to answer this one to the best of your ability, Anthony, because I know this isn't like your particular situation, but and Lauren brings this up. I'm sure that we'll get to this in weeks to come, but I'm a solo member LLC, but might have investors in the future. Not sure how to basically like configure your business from like an entity standpoint, I think is the question. And she doesn't want to like hire employees blindly without knowing them, understandably.
So is the question about like changing it from a solo LLC to something else, or?
I guess not sure. I guess it'd be a two-part question. One about like hiring employees, and then the second would be, if you do want to bring on investors, like what exactly would you have to change with your business entity? With the disclaimer that neither of us are lawyers.
Yeah, so that's definitely a lawyer question. But if there's like two ways that I think about investors. One is you can kind of structure an investment like a loan that you have to pay back, in which case you don't really have to change anything. The other case is if you can think of an investor as like a part owner. If you decide to give them ownership shares for whatever their investment purchases, in which case then you kind of do have to reconfigure. I don't know if you have to reconfigure with the government. You still have like your paperwork, but you probably just have to form that lists these other people as owners. And then it changes all their taxes, but you don't really care. It definitely is like you'd want to talk to about that. A lawyer and an accountant. The accountant is probably more relevant because they'll help you figure out how to make sure that you properly like file your taxes and all that stuff. And the second
part, hiring employees.
One thing is you can talk to other food truck owners. A lot of food truck owners that have employees will have them like part-time. And so if they have dependable part-time employees, you can hire those guys to fill your spaces if you need to. Depends on where you're vending, but a lot of cases you might not even need employees. So there's like some places that we vend at where like I can run the truck or my brother can run the truck by ourselves. Sometimes, obviously we need the two of us. For huge events, we might need one other person, and we just make sure that the menu that we have is set of 3 people can do this. And along the way, we've actually met people while vending, like breweries, they have employees there all the time that, again, possibly part-time, that as you build relationships with certain people, then you can kind of determine that, okay, I need, you need work, I have work. If you can make it for these days and you're consistent, then come work with us. So, you get the opportunity to kind of build these kinds of relationships. And again, like I said, talk to the other food truck owners that you run into. They'll have people that they can recommend for sure.
So here's a good one from Melanie. I tried reaching out to governing bodies and they were not very helpful. One department basically said they weren't the ones that regulated the food trucks. What's a good way to get in touch with the person that I'm trying to speak to? And I would say probably one big problem is that whoever you were talking to probably just didn't know even who to send, who themselves to send it to. I would say personally, probably just because this can be confusing, find someone in your area that's already a food truck owner, specifically in the area that you want to be at. Contact them, just be like, hey, who do I talk to about that? I would say most will probably be helpful, but if you don't get an answer from one, just keep trying. I don't know. What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah. When I was learning, I asked other food truck owners, and then there were also there was 2 like small business development organizations in Albuquerque. And both of them pointed me actually to the same person that I would talk to within city government to help me get started. So that's another source. So like first, I guarantee you at least one of them is going to be really friendly and helpful. if not most of them.
Yeah.
And then second, go to these like small business development organizations, and like universities might have one, local nonprofits. Most of these are like nonprofit organizations. And I'm sure that they've seen a few food trucks go through them, so they have the answers to some of the questions, if not at least know the person that you should go speak to in the city government. Those would be your two best bets for sure.
Yeah. And I was going to say too, Dave from our last class, he went to like this, who started the Polish food truck that I mentioned, that's doing really well now. He said that also that he went to the Center for Business Development in his area, and literally the exact same story as you, Anthony. They were like, oh, you got to talk to this dude who owns a food truck. And he just reached out to him, and it was super nice, and kind of just broke down what he had to do in his area to get started. So that's probably the easiest way to do it. Just Be Girl asked, should the first step be to register your business, or I guess what do you think you should do first?
Registering your business is actually like super easy. If you want to do it the easy way, and the easy way is to just like go on LegalZoom.com and just have them file it. It's like $125 or something like that. And they just send you the paperwork that you need to sign. Just read through the paperwork thoroughly, sign it, and then they give you like the form, the envelopes you need to mail it out to the proper groups. Most state websites, I would guess, New Mexico is like in the Stone Age compared to most states. And our website was actually really straightforward about, registering your business with the state. $125 if your state websites are as helpful. So definitely peruse on there for sure. Most of it will be within like, city departments like urban development or business development, something like that. So start there, but the easy way is just go to like one of those legal websites that file the paperwork for you, because they're in every state. They know exactly where everything needs to go, and they've just made it like a no-brainer process.
Perfect. Okay, so next question, and this is a dependent one too. Can you work out of your home for prep, or must it always be a commercial kitchen or commissary?
So in the city of Albuquerque, we have to do it out of a commercial kitchen. Most cities are going to be like that. Although like New Mexico itself is very rural, and they have this weird law that like outside of the city of Albuquerque and the major metropolitan areas, which there's only like two, outside of those, you're actually allowed to do prep out of your home kitchen. So it's very weird, just because like the local county governments, which in those areas, jurisdiction is the word I was looking for. The counties that have jurisdiction will have something like that, because they don't really have the resources to go and police, and also the counties themselves don't have the resources. Like there are no commercial kitchens, for instance. So it really depends on where you live. If you live like out in the middle of nowhere, it's probably okay, but you need to talk to like your county or state government to know for sure.
Okay. This goes back to what you were mentioning probably like 20 minutes ago. Vizela asks, what do you mean by like other businesses that you partner with?
Other businesses that we partner with. Yeah, so there's like a ton. Being a food truck, one of the most fun parts of being a food truck to me is the fact that like we meet other business owners who want to do stuff with us. So for instance, like the commercial kitchen that we're using as our commissary is a business partnership. They were really excited at the idea of us coming in there and bringing in revenue that they had never even thought of. And we got the return benefit of having a commercial kitchen. And actually, we also, like right before they got bought out by another nonprofit, we were working on doing a kind of a joint program where we would do like a pay what you can afford kind of breakfast for their clients, people who are like on the way to work, whatever, who just need some food. And the only reason that that blew up was because like the executive director stepped down about a month before we had like gone forward, and then that's when we found out that there were also plans of like this buyout happening on the side. So that kind of fell apart. But all of these things are just like, you know, they're business partnerships. The breweries that we vend at for weeknights is a partnership. We have to like know the owners, we know like the employees, we've built a rapport with them, and then they'll, you know, hire us for like catering events that they do, or like brewery tours, or if they know that there's like a special gig going on, they invite us to vend for them because they, you know, they know our reputation, they enjoy the food, and they like the way that we work. So these are all business partnerships. Other stuff that we do, one of our favorites actually is happening now. We partner with a local corn maze. They like do this maze out of the cornfields that they have. It's actually like some different plant called sorghum, I think. And anyway, so they like have this maze, but it's out in the middle of nowhere. So we park out front of the maze, and we vend for them to keep their customers there, enjoying the maze, enjoying whatever activities they have, but also, you know, to feed them. And so it worked out for both of us. And 2 years ago, they did a fundraiser right after the corn maze, where we baked them like 50 apple pies that were like 18 inches in diameter. And so, you know, we gave them all these pies basically for like double cost, and they sold them for whatever they wanted as a fundraiser. And so we get being a food truck is, I love being able to like figure out ways to partner with businesses in new ways. We've done a lot of stuff with local like animal shelters and pet hospitals. And now we're like the go-to food truck for like working with animals in the community. We've done a lot of stuff for like bike races. We've done some MMA events, which was actually really fun. But, you know, just the more that you like, as you start getting out there, you start hearing stuff, you start developing these relationships, and then those relationships point you in the direction of new relationships. So if you are, you know, just slightly creative, you'll find a whole slew of stuff out there that most of the other food trucks haven't even thought of yet.
So Melanie asks, how do we get gigs in front of businesses like Home Depot, et cetera? Is there a particular partner or department that you have to go to? I know for Home Depot, they like, and the name escapes me of the company right now, but I'm sure if you called their general internal marketing department, they'd be able to provide you with like the contact information. But I know that there's like a large company that kind of like oversees who gets to go in front of like Home Depot, because Home Depot is a big corporation. And then there's a few other ones like that too, because I know you might see like a hot dog vendor, depending on where you live, in front of a Home Depot. So there's actually like a company that you have to like work through to get in there most of the time. It might be a little bit different if you're doing something like charity work. You know what I mean? You're going to sell something and donate something as part of a charity. You can probably get around it that way. But I know if you're just coming in as a food truck, trying to generate revenue, that way there's a certain amount of a fee that you have to pay, and like a separate company that you have to work through, and they make sure that you're licensed and you have insurance and all that stuff. But yeah, that you just contact the store; they'll be able to hook you up with that. Oh, and then also too, Melanie asked, what's the typical agreement like when you do an event, like any type of event, I guess, not just Home Depot necessarily? Do they get like a percentage of your sales? Or do you pay up front? Like, what's kind of the deal when you do an event usually?
That varies a lot. The events where they just charge a flat fee. And it really depends on like the event and the person running it. Like festivals and stuff like that will charge like maybe 200, 250, or, you know, depending on like how big the festival is. Like if you're doing like something like South by Southwest, I'm sure it's like $20,000 or something like crazy like that. Like the New Mexico State Fair is like $20,000 for 10 days. Albuquerque Balloon, or the International Balloon Fiesta, which happens here in Albuquerque, that just finished, it's like, you know, $25,000 for the week to vend there. But smaller festivals that are just as profitable are like $250 or $300. Some of the city ones are like $1,000, a little bit more manageable, but still expensive. Same time, there's some places that'll charge you, they'll charge you like a cut of your sales. So if you're doing like if you're working with a group for a nonprofit, for a fundraiser, I'm actually kind of okay with that as long as they're not asking for like 20% of our sales, which is like essentially all of our profit. Sometimes it'll be like 10, 15%. That's pretty manageable. Over time, we basically have established like we won't pay anything more than 15% of what we estimate our sales to be. So it really depends on like the event and who you're working with. Different organizations will do a percentage. Other organizations will just do a flat fee that you pay up front, or maybe they'll just say it's a $250 fee, but see you at the event or whatever. So that again depends.
Okay. And I also too, I realize we're going like, we try to keep these things at like an hour in length. I mean, I'm good to stay on if you're good to stay on, Anthony. And I realize like other people have other things to do. So, I mean, we're going to send this to, you know, if you have to leave now, that's fine. I know we're going 15 minutes already over the hour-long time, but we'll keep staying here, keep answering. But just know if you do have to leave, we'll send the recording tomorrow to your email. So, you know, if you want to watch it later, you can definitely do so. But otherwise, we'll just keep jamming through these questions for now, which is awesome. And thank you to everyone for submitting all these. And it looks like most folks are still on. So we're just going to keep jamming here. Okay. So, okay. From Ryan, if you were to build your own commissary, would it be very expensive? And might you as well just build a brick and mortar restaurant at that point? And I would definitely say, yeah, just get a brick and mortar for sure, get a restaurant. And that's really what a ton of food truck owners that like are successful, like eventually they're kind of like, because it can be hard sometimes and a grind to like always have to go to a commissary to get something, to get your food prepped every single day. And as you guys probably already know, and I think I saw some of the comments in there, some of the commissaries are actually pretty expensive. So a lot of times it's not like a huge leap to just get a restaurant location instead. Then you've got this place baked in where people can come. You know, you've already got a brand established a little bit. You've already got some customers. People know about you from running a food truck for a year or two. And then boom, you know, you've got your own restaurant where you can start generating, you know, more consistent revenue, have a fixed location, and then also, you know, operate your trucks out of. So yeah, I would definitely say in most cases, unless you want to, you know, just start working with other food trucks that you've owned, probably for most folks, going the brick and mortar route would be the way to go. And yeah, too, in most cases, you know, a restaurant, that's going to be fine for your commissary. Okay. Oh, question from Barbara. I think as long as you have permission from a business, you can park there as long as you're 400 feet from any brick and mortar. That's definitely one of those depends on where you live type thing. You know, some cities it might be 200 feet. Some might not want you to park downtown in certain areas at all. Some only let you do it at certain times. I don't know, Anthony, like what is it? Is there one of these like restrictions in Albuquerque where you can't park within a certain distance of a restaurant?
Now there is. Those jerks. They passed this law 2 years ago. That like the local restaurant association like lobbied to have the city government passed this stupid regulation that said that food trucks can't be within 100 feet of a brick and mortar restaurant, which is absurd because they did it for like this part of town where there's like literally just restaurants on top of restaurants. So they're like okay with neighbor competition, but they didn't want like food truck competition as well. Anyways, yeah, so like those kinds of laws vary all over the place. Like in Albuquerque, park in any normal like city designated parking spot and public street, for instance, without, you know, if you just pay like any parking requirements like parking meter or whatever, if that's there. Different cities have different requirements. Like some cities might actually need you to have like a special parking permit or whatever. So that you have to definitely talk with like your local parking authority. And for some reason, Albuquerque like just honestly doesn't really care about that sort of thing. So we never had to worry about it. And the other thing to consider is like some cities also say like whatever happens on private land is the business of the landowner, which is how we're able to like park at like breweries and stuff like that. Like they have a back door that we park at a lot of times, and they have, so it's their property and we can do whatever we want in that area because it's now like at the fault of the business owner. And so that's just like one of those weird regulations that has gotten through.
Yeah, and that's a great point too that you raised too, because I know, you know, you think that like sometimes there's like this competition between like food truck owners and restaurant owners, but I know a lot of food trucks too. They can actually do really well partnering with, say, like a bar. A bar has, you know, drinks, and maybe they don't want to get into food, and they'll let you park, you know, at certain times on their property, and serve people food so that they stick around longer, that sort of thing. There's, you know, an agreement that you can kind of work out with them. That way they don't leave around, you know, supper time or whatever, even late at night if they get hungry. There's a place for them to go and kind of fill up. So there's, you know, definitely some opportunities there also. And also too, definitely make sure that you take a look at, and I don't know if there's anybody specifically doing like popcorn / kettle corn or, you know, gourmet hot dogs. If you're in like one of those two areas, definitely ask about, you know, if the commissary laws are different in your area for those two food types. Because a lot of times it seems like there's special laws and they're usually looser for like hot dog vendors. And that's just because, you know, the meat's already pre-cooked. You know, same with like kettle corn. It's really tough to get sick off of kettle corn, right? Like even if you've had it sitting in your car for like a month, you can like eat it and it might not taste that good, but you're not really probably going to get sick off of it unless you eat way too much of it. So there's, yeah, some little variances there.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the things that they talk, the health department here looks at is like, are we cooking food or are we serving pre-cooked food? And like the regulations for catering trucks where like all the food's already prepared is like way different than the regulations for food for trucks that are like doing the prep themselves. And so that's one thing that you want to look at as well. Like if you're just going to like reheat food, then you don't have to worry about a lot of the laws if that's how your city handles things.
So this question comes from Mario. Mario says, where can we get the statistics for the business case / business plan? I'm almost done with the business plan, but struggle with getting data. A lot of it is a couple of years old, and congrats for almost being done already, especially in the first week. That's really awesome that you've taken the initiative to work on this. But I don't know, do you have any thoughts for where to get like up-to-date statistics? Like 2 years old, honestly, like I'm thinking that's actually probably not that bad. That might be about as recent as you can get, depending on what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's actually pretty recent as far as like city statistics go. If you're thinking about like, if you're thinking of like traffic in areas, for a business plan, that's actually not bad. That's probably like what the finance officers are looking for. They don't really care that like each day at this hour, that's how many people are there. They just want to know, like, are there enough for you to do a good portion of sales that day in that location? So like, you know, if you're saying like at this intersection, people going through, I want to sell to, you know, 2% of those people, I make this much money off it. That's probably like totally sufficient. Otherwise, good places to go if you're like thinking of partnering with like bars, breweries, wineries, things that like get people to go, but there's no food options that they provide. Those businesses will have, you know, kinds of like sales numbers, traffic numbers, that sort of thing. At least if they're good businesses, they'll have that information. So there's a good place to go. Like if you're planning on being outside of like construction site, you can talk to the foreman and he knows how many employees are there, for instance. If there's people like, you know, you're in front of like 3 businesses, for instance, like you're at Office Park, you can talk to the managers there and they know how many employees are in each of the buildings, or they know how many employees are in their building, and then you go to the next door and find out how many employees are in their building. And that's also a good time to say, hey, we're going to have a food truck outside. What's the best way to like advertise to the staff that there's no cafeteria right outside? You know, so you can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone right there.
Good point. Jared asks, what are the additional costs above permits for vending for events? We have so many here in Austin, and this truck will be a secondary activity of my nonprofit, and I need to be able to anticipate what the costs are to attend some of these. I would definitely mention that you're a nonprofit, for one. That might help you.
Yeah, if you're a nonprofit, mention that everywhere. You get all kinds of like benefits and discounts and that sort of thing. So one thing is, obviously, like you have your normal business permits that you're required. Certain sized events, like I think you said you're in Austin, so like something like South by Southwest will require like its own slew of permits for, which you got to pay for. And then also like the group that's running it will charge like whatever their fee is. And most of the time that's it. There's probably a couple of circumstances where you might need to pay for like something else. Like maybe sometimes there's like an electricity fee or like a gas fee. If it's like an event where you're leaving your truck at and they like will dump your gray water for you, maybe there's a fee for that. So these are like, and usually they're pretty nominal. Like if they're going to charge electricity, it's going to be something like $50 a day or $10 a day or whatever the case is. I haven't ever run across like a gray water dumping thing, but I have run into the electrical thing before. And usually in that case, I'm like, fine, I'll just use my generator. Cost me less than what you're charging. But other than that, it's like a real specific case, and I can't think of what other kinds of fees. That's I guess the benefit of a food truck is you're pretty self-sufficient, so you should just be able to park there and not have to worry about too much. Parking might be another fee.
Corinne is wondering too, and I think this is definitely a common question. Can you park your truck at home, or does it need to be at a commissary?
That's another regulation. If you live in like a homeowners association, they'll probably be pretty pissed off that you're parking your truck there, and they might change the bylaws to get your truck kicked out of the homeowners association. Where I live now is like a co-op, like a housing co-op, and they allow me to park my truck here. When we first started doing business here, they had no problem, and I told them like we're looking for a place to permanently store our truck. We just need it to like be parked here for like a few nights. One thing you want to think about is like if you're going to store food on the truck, like in your fridge, you need to keep the fridge running all night long. So you want to be able to park it in a spot where you can like plug in. And so like commissaries, some commissaries will have like food truck parking. You can park your thing at. The place where we park our truck is it's like this gated. It was like a old like that got turned into like an art studio, and the guy who owns the building lets us park our truck there for $200 a month, and he also allows us to plug in for free. So that's like a huge benefit, and it's all like gated with barbed wire around the top so that people can't like break in. So that's like a huge bonus for us. And these are also like little expenses that pop up that as you do the research, you're kind of glad that you did it ahead of time, knowing that these things cost some fee every month. If you park it at home, you know, how are you going to get power to your truck? If you need to store stuff in there, that's one thing to think about. Do you have like the proper extension cable? For instance, we did a catering event at somebody's house. It was for their wedding, and we needed to be able to plug in because they didn't want the generator they didn't want the generator on because it would make noise and ruin the ambiance of their reception. And so we basically hacked their dryer plug so that we could plug our truck in where their dryer would be. So maybe, you know, the dryer plug actually has enough power to supply power for your truck. Maybe you do that. Maybe you have like a special fork that you can use that plugs your like refrigerator directly in your house or wherever it's plugged in. So these are things that you have to think about, and that's probably the most important. Is like if you're going to store it somewhere, that's actually if you're going to store it anywhere, do you need power to the truck, and can you get power to the truck if you need to plug it in?
And Lamarcus, thanks again. And anyone else too, I should put this blanket statement. If I missed your question and you submitted it a while ago, definitely just feel free to submit it there. I'm not trying to be mean. I just probably means I accidentally just missed it. But the question is, do you think it's a good idea to rent your truck instead of buying it for the first year, just to kind of like test out the waters first, and like what would the average rental cost be?
So we looked at renting
this too. But go ahead.
I'll do the short answer because I don't know that much about it. But I did some research when we first looking at getting a truck, and like every option was like way more expensive than we could afford or want. It was like essentially like it would like work itself out to be like $30,000 a year for like just renting the truck, which at that price might as well buy the truck. If you're gonna like just do it for like events and you have like a catering business and you just need a place to like serve stuff out of, it's probably fine for just like a day or like a week or so. But if I don't think it's worth it to rent it if you're gonna try this out for more than like a month or two. Brett, I know you have some experience with this. So.
I mean, I know like, and there's not that many like truck rental companies where you can like rent a food truck. I mean, sometimes you could like rent it from the actual owner, but that's tough too, like, because obviously anybody that owns their food truck, one, they're probably going to be busy on the same day that you are. And then two, I mean, think about it. If you owned your truck, would you really want to lend it out to some other guy who's potentially not going to take care of it, that sort of thing? With all that being said, mobymunch.com, and I'm going to just type this in so you can take a look at it. It's not available everywhere, but they like rent out food trucks. Yeah, it's not letting me write the actual URL because they think I'm spamming. So just mobymunch.com, what I just typed in. I want to say basically like what Anthony said, and I haven't seen their prices for a while, but yeah, okay. So you saw this one too. I mean, it's like a few $1,000s per month, just like what Anthony said. Yeah, it ends up costing you like 30,000. So, I mean, if you can, you know, if you really just want to test it out and test it out for like 1 day or 1 week, I think that's cool. But I mean, even if you're going to test it out for like 6 months and drop like, you know, $10,000, $15,000 on it, that's just like, yeah, it's so much of your truck that you could have like paid off with that money. Also too, I mean, like Anthony said, I mean, you got started before you even technically had a truck. You did like 2 or 3 events. You know, you can just do like a pop-up type event with tables and like a little tent. And I mean, if you really just want to like test it out, you can still cook the food and serve people, serve product there, or do some catering events and that sort of thing, and just get a feel for like, do people want the food that I'm serving? Like, how much work is this going to be? You find out pretty quick. what that's going to be there. But yeah, I guess bottom line, long term, I definitely wouldn't rent it. Let me see. Next question. Oh, okay. From Doug, is workers' comp needed for part-time help? Kind of talking about insurance requirements here.
Yeah, that totally depends on your local regulations. So for instance, for us, because there's just 2 official employees, like 2 full-time employees, we don't need workers' comp. And I think the law is like less than 4 employees is when, at least here in Albuquerque, less than 4 employees is when you need to worry about workers' comp. Your insurance provider would know a lot more about that. And he's another person to get like really friendly with, because they'll know, they're not trying to like rape you on the insurance. I mean, maybe some of them are, but at least the guy that we worked with was super friendly. You know, he was doing this as like a private broker himself. So he was like trying to just give everyone as good information as possible. So it really depends on like your local government, but definitely talk to like the person that you work with for your local insurance provider.
Barbara mentioned too that here in California, Placer County Health Department said that they could care less where your food truck is parked overnight for storage. So yeah, again, kind of depends on where you are. Corinne asks, are trucks regularly inspected besides just the first time? For your initial inspection, like what's that rule like where you are?
Here in Albuquerque, we get inspected twice a year. I don't really know how they would do this in like huge cities like New York and LA, but we have to schedule like our inspections because there's not enough employees to go around and like just pop in on us. 1, 2, they don't know where to find us most of the time anyway, so they're not gonna like stalk all of our Facebook accounts to find out like where we're vending on a certain day. So we have to like schedule these in advance, so like exactly when your inspection is going to be. Show up at that inspection and you know exactly what to expect. Like take all the time you need to like clean your truck and make sure that everything is, I mean, you should do this stuff all the time anyways, but like specifically for the inspections, you can be better prepared than if they just like showed up to your kitchen and you had just had like a horrible shift where like 100 people were outside and you served them all in 5 minutes and there's just like applesauce everywhere.
Applesauce everywhere. Okay. Lauren asks, I haven't bought a truck yet. Can I submit all my permits without a truck EIN? Whatever I forgot what that stands for, but basically like the number of the truck.
So I think you're thinking of like a VIN number.
Yeah. And there we go.
Because the EIN is like a number associated with your business for tax purposes. Anyways, so you can have like your business license, like your state official license and your IRS tax license. You can have all of that without a truck. The only thing you couldn't have is like a truck registration, your vehicle registration number, because you don't have a truck yet. And so I think at that point, your business is considered like catering, and you would have to talk to the health department about this for sure, because like how they would inspect you for catering is different than how they would inspect you as like an operational food truck. So in some places you would need to have like a different health permit for that, but in some places you might not. Like Save Albuquerque is the same health permit. They just kind of like inspect you on a different scale, for instance. So definitely talk to like your local, as you're talking about this, like, you know, as you're talking to the local authorities, definitely say like, I want to just do like a catering business first, and I expect to have a truck 6 months after I start. What's the difference in like the permits on that level for like my local government?
Good question from Vanzilla. What kind of security issues should you be thinking about when you're working at these different types of events and you're in just really, really public places?
Brett, I don't know if you have like any horror stories. I have not heard that many, maybe like 1 or 2 horror stories. We've never ever had an issue with security. Like I said, we park our truck it's kind of like in the middle of nowhere in Albuquerque, and it's like well secured. But even at events, most of the time people are fine. We only had one issue one time where like we were at a major city event, and like some guy like tripped over our power cord and like ripped it out of the wall, so it was all like frayed and stuff. So I had to like do some like electrician kung fu to like put that together in like 5 minutes so that we could operate our truck. But that was like the only time that ever happened, and it was like in our 2nd month in business. But most of the time, like it's perfectly fine. You might want to have like, make sure you don't have like a ton of cash with you. Obviously, if you get robbed, if you're in like a really bad area and crime is high, you could also just like avoid those areas. And you know, otherwise insurance should cover you for this kind of loss. So you have like, and I think this is a question that Salsa just asked, is what type of insurance would you get for driving? So there's actually like your food truck insurance should cover you for 2 things. One, there's like general business liability insurance, and then there's like the normal vehicle insurance. And so like there's different coverages under both that I don't fully understand. But the food truck itself is looked at as both like a vehicle that gets covered and also as a business, like a normal business. And so, you know, if something ever does happen, the insurance, the business side of the insurance covers all of that stuff. And the insurance agent will walk you through all of this stuff. Like, how does that stuff work? And those are definitely great questions to ask that person, for sure. Like if we get robbed or if like our stove breaks, how do we go about getting compensated for this thing? Because our stove is like $4,000 or $2,000 if it's used or whatever.
Would you suggest puckboard interior walls or an interior wall for these DHEC inspection?
I don't even know what that means. Puckboard interior walls. I gotta Google this really quick. Good, Brett Stahl.
What kind of interior walls do you have, Anthony? Actually, I was going to say too, and Anthony, you can feel free to answer that in a second. But just to, I mean, we'll keep answering questions here, but just for next week, kind of wanted to like run through some housekeeping items. Well, we got a second here, and I'm stalling for Anthony to search what these puckboard interior walls are. I'm going to be sending out an email. Again, tomorrow, it's going to have the recording of this class, and it's also going to have information about next week's class in there too. And, you know, next week, like we said before, like this week, we're really just doing like, we're like all over the place answering questions. And I realized that especially the first time to log on to the live class, like just that you're here at YouTube Live and you logged in successfully and you're watching this, that's a win in and of itself right there, which is awesome because sometimes these tech things don't work out so well. So yeah, just expect an email from me tomorrow, recording of the class, and it's also going to have like documents for next class too. So if you want to prepare for next week, which we're really going to be starting to dive into like the business plan part in week 2. You know, you can get ahead of the game and do some research there. And then we'll also be sending out a questionnaire too, just to get your general feedback on some other topics that you want covered. Week 7 is like an open week, again, where we don't have anything specific that we're going to be covering that week. So if there's a bunch of people that have questions about what oven should I purchase, or, you know, just any particular topic, we can kind of adapt the class weeks to fit into that. Anyways, Anthony, you probably know what a puck wall is now, don't you?
I think I do. So they're basically like flat surface walls that are easy to clean, and they look like they're some type of plastic, and Lauren actually said polyethylene. On our truck, we just have these like aluminum sheet walls, essentially. So they're equal to that. They're like easy to clean. The only difference, and I actually just suggested this in the chat box, is that you'll want to make sure that the walls can tolerate like the high heat environment of the truck. Like near the stove, it'll get to be like 150 degrees. Anything touching the stove will probably be even hotter than that. So you want to really think about that. So metal's a good way to go. A high heat tolerant plastic would be all right, as long as it's not, you just don't worry that it's going to melt. Fabricator will most likely have good stuff planned for that.
Cool. Well, I think that's all the questions. I know we are, what are we at? Like an hour and a half now? Oh, hour 45 minutes. Okay. Well, thanks to everybody that is still here. Thanks for sticking around. You're obviously serious about this business. Hope that you had fun the first week. We'll be here again, week number 2. And then, you know, if there's anything we missed, obviously we'll have a QA at the end next week too. But see everybody next week. And thanks for all the awesome questions.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.